you could say, Nick Wrestler, younger core who they've kind of pushed out and
Mhm.
they wanted to bring in maybe adults into the room. And not saying
Yeah.
that there weren't, but Ansi Sala seems to be, someone who comes from a
Mhm.
reputable background, credible. They brought in other people, especially the other day. They announced that Bryson Graham and I forget the other
Peter
individual,
Dinwiddie.
Dinwiddie came over. So tell me what's that all about and what's the mood going on there?
Yeah, I think the big thing is just, as you mentioned, filling out with some experience. I think the big thing is that, they try to go in a different direction with a front office that's really big on collaboration. And at some point, you have to realize that you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen. Like, yes, you can have as many point of views as possible, but I think the big thing is you need somebody who's okay with making those big decisions. And that's not to say that Landry Fields wasn't that guy, but I just think that he's still so new in terms of what it means to run a front office. And I mean, I think the big thing is that Ansi Sala comes from, as we mentioned, quite a few different places like San Antonio and Golden State. And in both places, he built so much of a reputation of trust that some of those bigwigs were willing to kind of loosen the reins a little bit and let him, do quite a few different things. And so when you're able to do those jobs quite early on, with, I guess you could say the guardrails or the bumpers on, you're able to kind of not necessarily fail, so to speak, but you're able to learn from experience a little bit quicker. And I think that's kind of, what we saw with Ansi. And I think in terms of filling out the front office with, say, Bryson Graham and Peter Dinwiddie, you have a guy in Bryson Graham who's, known for his acumen in terms of scouting for the draft. And so that's something that the Hawks have really needed, especially over the last couple of years where they've struggled to find the right pieces in the draft. I mean, Zachary Restructured is kind of the anomaly right now, just because with the number one overall pick, yes, you can swing and miss, but it's still a number one overall pick. You do have to take that risk, but I don't think that's the case for Zachary. But the previous two drafts with Kobe Buffkin, a guy that now has been injured for his first 2 years, and then AJ Griffin the year before, who now is out of the league. Those are two guys that you haven't really been able to get really much production out of over the last 3 years. And so I think you want to add a little bit more experience in terms of finding talent from those young players. And obviously Bryson Graham is known for being able to do that. And what a way to start with this draft class, which is so good. And then Peter Dinwiddie is, of course, somebody who's very analytical. And, you want to have that sort of voice in this space.
So do they not give Landry? First off, is Kyle Korver? Because I saw him at the combine. I literally sat next to him at a restaurant. He's still with the organization because he was also at Hoop Summit, and he was. Is he still assistant GM too?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know teams can have multiple assistant GMs, so I didn't know.
So I think the big difference, though, is that Bryson Graham and Peter Dinwiddie, they are senior executive vice presidents of their roles. And Kyle Korver is still technically an assistant general manager. Ansi Sala is a general manager. And the way that the system or the structure of the office is sort of, yes, Graham and Dinwiddie are going to report to Ansi, but they're seen sort of on the same level as him, is how it's been explained to me. So I don't know how that, will totally work out, but they are Ansi's hires.
And the interesting thing, I think, about all of this, even going back to Landry Fields, is everybody is interconnected going back to the Spurs in some way. Either they overlapped with the Spurs somewhere else, but more than all of them, even Quinn Snyder is a former Spurs assistant in some sort of way, either coaching or personnel. And we even knew that was a big reason with the whole DeJounte Murray trade and all that. So I just want to know and yesterday it's funny that this kind of came out that the Knicks even reached out to the Hawks about Snyder's availability, and they were firmly denied.
Yes.
What is because again, I when I originally reached out to you, I was like, Snyder was like the big hire, the
Mhm.
big fish available. They brought him in mid-season on what was supposedly a big deal. There was
Mhm.
rumors that he had a voice on the roster. Then that was dispelled in the
Mhm.
offseason. What is, I guess, the new regime's thoughts on him? I assume like they're kumbaya, and does he have a say on the roster? And is he credited with the development on guys like Garrison Matthews and, am I saying this correct? Vít Krejci and
Krejci.
Krejci,
Like
Krejci,
crayon, but Krejci. Yeah.
crayon. Wait,
Like
crayon,
Krejci. Like cray.
Krejci. Okay,
Yeah.
Krejci, Vic Krejci. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
Vic Krejci, and a few of the other young guys on this, like Mogay, and
Yeah.
just really a lot of the hidden gems on that roster.
Definitely. I think that's the thing with, these past couple of years. It's really been about development of the roster, just because, they've lacked so many like star-studded pieces that it's hard to really not develop those guys, especially because they had so much playing time with so many injuries to this roster. That's something that the Hawks have severely lacked these last couple of years, as well as depth. So definitely Quinn Snyder has been, a credit to the development of those guys, because he and his staff have put them in positions to succeed. And I think the big thing is that he does have a voice. I don't think that, the front office would totally discount his his opinion on what his roster needs. But at the end of the day, it was always told to us that the final say was Landry's. And so I guess you could kind of see it in terms of the lack of depth, the lack of size, and the fact that Garrison Matthews was getting so much playing time. And that's not a knock against Garrison Matthews, because he is a tremendous person and he did what, he was expected and needed to do at the time. But unfortunately, that's just not what the Hawks needed in order to be a championship contender. And so, yeah, I think, they did the best with what they had, but unfortunately, it just ended up putting them in the middle of the pack still. But I definitely think that, as we said, Snyder has a voice, but I don't think he necessarily has the final say.
Yeah, and I think that was a great way to put it. Is like no one's going to disregard your coach unless obviously it turns out the situation we saw in Denver,
Yeah.
where the GM and the coach clearly were not on the same page. Now, moving forward, I think you touched about it. Their injuries are a
Mm-hmm.
concern with this team. Yeah, I loved Kobe Buffington as a prospect, and everything I've seen and heard. It's an unfortunate thing that the best ability is availability, and the backup point guard position has
Yep.
cursed Atlanta since, I guess, Lou Williams left town, and Lou Williams wasn't even a legit backup point guard for them because Chris Dunn was a failed signing due to that. I think what,
Mm-hmm.
a hand injury or thumb or something
Something like that.
weird
Can't
just
remember all
kept
off
him
the
out.
top of my head.
Yeah, and then the thing I want to ask is moving forward, it seems like they need a repeat of what they, and obviously different regime, but the year they went on a run, they brought in a bunch of older guys. It felt like they had Solomon Hill, Daniil Gallinari. That's when they first brought in Bogdan
Mm-hmm.
Bogdanovic. It felt like they surrounded themselves with at least like 5 or 6 established guys.
Yeah.
And I feel like they were able to bring some of those guys in, Karis LeVert and George Niang. What is like, I guess maybe just the outlook in your opinion that they are going for a playoff push, or is this another transition year?